Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's now gone 2 o'clock, so I'm going to start the meeting, which is a local review body meeting reconvened from the meeting of Wednesday, the 11th of March, which seems a very long time ago. First of all, are there any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. No apologies given for this reconvened meeting, but Councillor McCutcheon is currently not present.
Thank you. In the interest of clarity and for the record, we normally appoint a chairman, but my understanding that procedure is that as this is a reconvened meeting, the chairman convened at the March meeting continues in that role.
Yes, correct, Chairman. We may be in June, but as far as the papers are concerned, this is the 11th of March. Continuing.
Thank you for that. Are there any declarations of interest? There were none at the last meeting, so that's fine. You now have in front of you the additional information which was requested at the last meeting. Do you have anything to add to that?
Thank you, Chairman. I can perhaps refresh memories of what was agreed at the last meeting. You agreed that further guidance be sought from Historic Scotland with particular reference to their letter of 9th of September 2014 on their position, as this was considered ambiguous regarding materials and quality of design expected, and for further support for the proposal. You also asked for further information be sought from the council planners with regards to extract of an email provided by the agent at the foot of page 82 of the papers, where the full email was requested, together with a timetable of correspondence and discussions between the council and the agent and the applicant for the first 6 months of 2014, which may help to explain the decision reached and why. You have copies of the information requested, and you also have copies of the applicant's response to those the information provided.
Thank you. Are members satisfied that they now have in their possession the information that we sought in March? Do you have any comments? Councillor Hislop?
Chair, I take it we're at the point where we determine that we've had enough information and we're going on to determine the application. Is that the point we're at just now?
That's my understanding.
Well, if that's the case, Chair, I can understand why the officer was hesitant to agree this. However, I think the benefits that would actually accrue from having Carnsalloch upgraded outweigh the possible or slight detriments of the actual planning application for the enabling works of the other houses. I do have some sympathy with the fact that we should be looking to add certain conditions to the planning application with regard to the materials for the roof. I personally would like to see slate on the roof rather than metal. And I notice also that the colour of the render was a concern to Historic Scotland, and I'm sure that we could get an agreement between the three parties to a colour that would be suitable, or colours that would be suitable. So I was wondering if we put that on as a condition as well.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Chair. I think maybe there's I mean, I've got a lot of sympathy for what Councillor Hislop has just put forward. I think what I'm really trying to get to the bottom of is, though, is that an appropriate condition to be able to attach to something without deviating materially from the original proposals as were sort of presented to us in terms of what the planning officer would have been considering? I know in Planning Applications Committee we often attach conditions similar to what's just been suggested, but and maybe that's where we need to sort of seek some guidance, or what the limits are in terms of what we can attach as conditions in order to, should we wish to come to a determination like that. If that makes any sense.
Yes, governance, we are seeking, planning, yes. Yeah.
I would say that was exactly the question that you need to ask, whether you consider by putting those conditions it would materially affect the appearance and design. One thing from reading the reports that I would make you aware that this is based on enabling development and finance, and another implication may be if you're requesting a condition and you're inferring that it should be slate, what implications that has in terms of balancing the enabling development because of the cost involved with changing the materials, and whether they will be able to adhere to that condition or because of the figures.
I presume we have no way at this point in time to ascertaining whether the change in materials would substantially affect the cost, but is it on the same issue, Councillor Hislop?
My understanding was that conditions had to be reasonable, and I would have thought asking for a slate roof would be reasonable, as the applicant in his further submissions has said he'd be happy to put a slate roof on. And the colour of the render, I don't think that would actually affect the building of the costs, what colour it is. The only other concern I would have is, can we tie the development of the house to the new houses so that we don't have the new houses built in a wreck or a ruin sitting next to it?
I think on paragraph 4.8 of the report of handling, it suggested that it can be done by condition. Another way of doing that would be, which is suggested in the Historic Scotland correspondence, is by a section 75. So then it would be a phased development, but it would also be tied to any further or subsequent landowner or purchase.
Councillor McComb?
My concern is similar to that of Councillor Thompson. It is the advice provided here by the planning service manager that it is only within the power of the panel to consider the proposal which was before the appointed officer at the time of the initial decision. Now, whether changes to the colour of render, changes to the roofing material would be regarded as non-material amendments, I'm not sure. And I'm not just quite clear where such changes would stand. Are they material amendments or are they non-material?
It really does fall outside my remit as the advisor to advise whether you consider it material or not. We, in cases there is conditions like materials to be agreed at a later date, are put on to applications. Again, it would be really a decision whether you feel it would be taken away from what the application you've got in front of you is.
You want to come back? No, you just leave it. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. I notice in the reply, the additional information I received from the applicant, and where they've sort of listed some of the concerns or some of the points that subsequently came out from the Historic Scotland response that we'd asked for, and it sort of lists through them in terms of the design of materials on the slate and the render, the design of the west wing, the design of the villas, etc. Now, although there's there seems to be an enthusiasm to follow these quite happily, and it doesn't mention that this would actually impact on the cost concerns surrounding enabling development. You know, there seems to be a willingness to sort of move there. I mean, my reading of that is that on the design aspects, to me, that's moving over the line of what's material. You know, I feel, although on the finishes, in terms of the slate and the render, I can think of examples in planning committee, for example, where the finishing has been a condition that's been attached. So, so that's something that's been attached to an application that we've had before us when we're considering it. So it seems to be not unusual to do that. So, however, the changes to design in terms of the design of the villas, where they're simplifying the massing of villa clusters, etc., or the design of the west wing. Sorry, not so much that, but it's more the design of the villas in particular. Would suggest that maybe a revised application should be submitted if that were the case. But in terms of the finishing materials, I could see how that could be attached as a condition. So I'm just, again, we're in this kind of a unsure ground where it's a wee bit of, it seems to be a bit of both. So I think it's back to the same questions as Councillor McComb asked you, I suppose. But is there any further guidance, or are you going to guide us to basically make the decision ourselves on what's material?
It really is your call whether you think it's material. I would advise that if you reviewing the application, if you feel that there is amendments required to the application, then that should you be going with to uphold the appointed officer's decision, and it's noted that there's the amendments that you feel might be appropriate, but it should be a new application.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, if this was a planning application, we would have heard from objectors, applicant, and during that process, the applicant, who could have sat over there, would have told us that he's willing to accept slate. And during that process, we could then amend the conditions in a planning application. Now, my understanding from reading this, we have that ability to put in appropriate conditions. Now, the palette of colours and the roof materials, I would suggest, were not a significant material change, and that they would fall within our remit to actually change them on the day to put appropriate condition. And there's also the planning obligation with regard to tying, whether it's a condition or section 75. I'm easy on that, but I would like to see that put in as well to make sure that we don't have the enabling development without having the redevelopment of the original house. And I would move that we approve this application, contrary to recommendation of the officers, with the conditions, standard sort of conditions that we put in with roads and whatever, and that the materials for the roof will be of slate, colours will be a palette to be agreed with officers, and that I'm wondering which is the best one, whether section 75 or a condition to tie it together would be the best, or the easiest to make sure that we get what we want out of this for the building and if the enabling to be done.
I take it that the roofing slate here, this is for the entire development. Yes. Councillor Thompson.
Just on how well can we ensure that conditions such as, I think from the feedback we've had from Historic Scotland, that the developers have obviously also had as well, is that something that we could attach as a condition in terms of taking into account the feedback from Historic Scotland, or is it reasonable for us to sort of say we must all meet, the developer, the planning officers and Historic Scotland, or is that out with the power of what a condition can do? Because can we force Historic Scotland to be at the table at such a meeting, or is that in terms of determining the final colours or palette to be agreed.
Governance? Or planning,
Yeah.
whoever?
No, we couldn't request as wording of the condition that they're there as part of normal practice. If it has involved Historic Scotland before, they would be consulted or involved in the discharging of the condition.
Councillor McComb?
Having read the papers, Chair, I've got to be of the opinion that had a tripartite meeting taken place, this planning application could have been resolved much earlier than has occurred. That I feel that we've been going round, appear to have been going round in circles for some considerable time. On the one hand, you have advice that a contemporary design theme should be followed. On the other hand, you have advice that high quality traditional materials should be used. And, these things are not always compatible. That, I can understand the developer here having frustration and being unsure just precisely the way forward. Had there been a meeting of the three different parties, we could have reached agreement much earlier.
Yeah, we concur with that. It seems to have been a very lengthy process, but we are where we are, and I have a motion here. Do you wish to comment on that situation that Councillor McComb's just outlined?
In making a decision, there is a difference between looking at how the application was dealt with, and there is a separate, council has a separate process if they feel that the application hasn't been dealt with correctly in our complaints, and the application that you're reviewing today and whether you consider the design and the reason for refusal is actually acceptable. And I think there's a distinction between the two.
As I said, we have a proposal. Do we have to approve contrary to recommendation? Do we? You wish to add to that, Councillor
Yeah, it
Hislop?
was just clarification on what was felt to be the best way to achieve the tying of the enabling development to the house, whether it be Section 75 or a condition.
I say it can be done in either way. With a Section 75, it is highlighted on searches, and it's more transparent in terms of it being attached to the site than a condition, which will just be form part of the decision.
We're in your hands, Councillor Hislop.
Chair, then could we suggest that Section 75 be the appropriate mechanism to make sure that both the enabling and the original house are developed?
Can indeed. Do you have a seconder?
I think I'm leaning that way. I think the only, just on what the advice earlier in terms of the two different ways of following up the process by which the original application was dealt with, and if there's an issue around that, which obviously the developer has gone at length to point out in numerous communications, but how does that get taken away from this particular process? Is it just something that can be followed up within the sort of appropriate channels within the council in terms of a lesson learned or lessons that can be ongoing, or is that something for the developer to follow up, or can we gently push that in some way so that we look at how best we deal with these processes? As Councillor McComb was saying, if we'd had these meetings earlier on, it might have been a completely different landscape now that we're looking at. Aside from that as well, I would be minded to second Councillor Hislop on the basis that there is a legal agreement. The materials and the slate roof, etc., are determined to satisfaction based on the advice given by Historic Scotland.
Thank you. Any lessons learned from this, or this was originally?
Thank you. I'll certainly provide some feedback to our colleagues in planning about the perhaps improvements that could have been made or lessons learned. Make sure that they're taken on board.
Thank you. So, Councillor McComb.
Chair, looking at page 135 of the papers, I can understand the officer's reasoning. Now, there was advice prior to submission that there should have been the use of slate. There was advice to minimise white render. I think there may also have been advice to minimise the colour, the amount of colour being used in the cladding material. And, you know, if you look at that page, there is still quite a bit of white render. Certainly no slate on the roofs. And a fair variety of colour in the walling materials. So I can understand the officer's reasoning here, but are these material things? These are superficial things. You know, the roofing material, the colour of the render, surely these are superficial. But there was advice prior to submission in, was it September? Submission took place September last year. No, August of last year. No, the final Historic Scotland response came after submission. My apologies on that.
The point's well made. It's here on, and I take your point. It's not the planners being thrown. It's there for the developers to consider. And clearly, we were uncomfortable, or planning was uncomfortable with the proposal. So I can see where you're coming from. Well, we do have a proposal, and we do have a seconder, and we have extra items to add. Can we summarise that? Governance, are you ready to do that? Do you want in before?
I was just minded at what stage, if the motion was going forward, whether we needed to include any conditions that you felt might be appropriate.
We encapsulate that?
Well, currently,
conditions?
what I've got is there's a motion proposed by Councillor Hislop, seconded by Councillor Thompson, to move that the decision of the appointed officer be reversed and the application be approved, subject to conditions, those being regarding the roofing to be slate, the render to be appropriate colour in consultation with Historic Scotland, and there should be a condition to tie in the development of the houses to the redevelopment of the main house, Section 75 agreement.
Are these the three conditions?
Those were specific ones, but I think there's usually access ones, etc., that I would expect to be normal ones that you would put on. I think I did mention any of the standard ones that usually go on, just to, because if you give it as is, they don't need to upgrade the road into Carnsalloch. I think there's a significant number of developments there that would require, whether it's tarmacking or passing places, etc. I think there was roads advice given on the actual entrance.
I think you're right, in the roads correspondence, they're advising that passing places should be added as a condition. Also in Historic Scotland's advice, they're advising about landscaping and perhaps having greening between the new development and the existing. We would usually have a second condition which ensures that that's planted within the first planting season. And whether you feel any tree survey work needs to be carried out on the existing trees. And archaeology and building recording. And whether you have any for the parking within the site. There's also, you might want to look at whether we, in terms of the flood risk assessment that was submitted, whether it was secured to make sure it was implemented as in accordance with the flood risk. And that's.
I make that 9, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, those
Yes.
are the ones that I would expect to normally see there anyway. So that's, I think we should add those in because it would be the same for any other building, you know, a bat survey, etc., etc.
Thank you. Yes.
I would maybe advise that if you are going down the Section 75 route, that this would be a willingness to approve the application subject to the signing of the Section 75. I think it is common that it is given 6 months to do this, and then it's looked into them.
Thank you. Do you want that read out again if we manage to catch it all? I'll give governance time to. So I can. Thank you. Excuse me.
Thank you, Chairman. Right. In addition to the roofing, the render, and the condition to time the development of the house to the new houses by Section 75, there is conditions on access and passing places, landscaping being screening and planting, tree survey work, archaeology, parking, flood risk assessment, and willingness to approve the application subject to signing of Section 75 within 6 months.
Is that satisfactory? Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's just confirming what, I mean, I think when we looked at this originally, most of those sort of internal consultations, if you like, were included in their original report, mostly with no objections or some recommend, like the roads condition. So I'm assuming we're just basically reiterating what's actually in the report originally anyway. So standard conditions. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes, Councillor McComb.
In the absence of advice to the contrary, I assume that these conditions are of a non-material nature. And in that case, I would be prepared to support the motion.
I think that's your comment. Right. Are we all content? Reasonably so? Do you want to add anything?
I just want to be clear, because if we're going against policy, the clear reasons of why you are making a decision that you believe it accords with policy. I think we need to be clear that for the minutes.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, what I was saying was it's an exception to policy, and the material grounds are that the benefits to the existing building of redeveloping that and not losing a Grade A listed building outweigh the policy determinations of whether the houses are acceptable or not. I don't think they're that far away from what they need to be to allow this to go forward. That's what my reason was, that the material consideration of the dilapidation or further dilapidation of Carnsalloch House, we need to look at the enabling works to allow this to be brought back into use.
Well, it's fair enough. There's sufficient weight in that consideration to make an exception to policy. Yes.
Just to sort of augment that, I think, I mean, in the page 28 of 572, I think it's basically accepted that it's considered to be acceptable in principle, albeit as a significant departure from policy anyway. I think the main concern was the high standard of design quality required, which I think, you know, what the conditions are, given their sort of recent information, that's what we're sort of trying to address. So I think in principle it was accepted that it would be a significant, although accepted, departure from policy, given the uniqueness of the building, if you like. So just to support what Councillor Hislop's saying.
Thank you. Just to summarise.
But thank you for that additional clarity, that the reasons will be fully expressed in the decision notice that would follow this meeting, as well as in the summary in the minute. So that would be basically you're agreeing to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and approve the application for Carnsalloch House, Kirkton, Dumfries as an exception policy, and that the upgrading of the house outweighs the further dilapidation of Carnsalloch House and the surrounding area, and subject to the 9 conditions already stated.
I think, Chair, it's important to remember that Historic Scotland did not object to the proposal.
Right, I think we've given that a good airing. I think I can draw this to a conclusion and have no other business. So thank you for your attendance.